back, everybody, to the culture of. Now, it feels wild because this is actually first episode of the new year. Even though we're batching a little bit, but we're getting ready for the new year.
Yeah.
In real life, we're doing a little bit of vacationing and stuff, but we want to make sure we're ready. So, being that this is the new year,
Yeah.
this episode is the culture of reinvention. Those new year vibes and everything where we start thinking about what we can do better, how we want to change, how we want to progress, how we want to evolve. And in any world, especially the one that we're in now, reinvention is a major activity. It's a major subject. It's a major talking point.
Yeah.
So if this is your first time, I'm just going to do a quick rundown of our segments. I'm just going to start with rising above the noise. We kind of did that already. Then we go into decoded, longer than a moment, built on vibes, and we end with let that sit. So that's a quick rundown. You'll kind of get the vibe as we go along. But before we start all that, my name is Gary J. Nix, and to my left, as pretty much always, except for maybe one episode, we have
Amber Chenevert, PhD, with Gary, as always, in handling our culture of business.
Thank you. Thank you for being here as always. And, let's actually get into this because it feels kind of exciting with everything that we're thinking about, everything that's on our minds, everything that's happened this year.
Yes.
This year was really on something.
Yes. In many parts of the country, we would call it a doozy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And here in New York, we just say 2025 was on some shit. But
cool.
Yeah.
That's right.
But I think we can all agree with that. And that's why I thought it was a good idea to kind of talk about reinvention, not only for personal devices or anything, but also just in general. Like everything feels like it's in a state of reinvention.
Yeah.
Not just AI, as Comet would say many years
Right.
ago, but just everything. It feels like we're at this, or not this, another major inflection point,
Yeah.
which causes the need for reinvention.
And we've talked about this, over and over again about what this means for advertising as an industry, what it means for marketing. But when we were speaking before, we were really starting to dive into what does this mean for the reinvention of how we think about marketing strategies. And that brings us to a little bit of attention here when we're thinking about the culture of reinvention, which is that tension between reinvention that is grounded in hype, which could be tied to a stock price, and grounded in substance, which could be tied to short-term and long-term revenue.
Right.
Now, we know that there can be a correlation between stock price and revenue, but it doesn't mean that there's causation. So we have to be careful.
Correct. Right? It feels like so many conversations, especially this year and probably previous years, but this felt like it was at a zenith this year, was success measured by stock price.
Yes.
And not to say that has nothing to do with it, but this year I had been talking a whole bunch about, okay, what is success? How do we define it? Not only as someone who's paying attention to the conversations that are happening, but since both of us are strategists, part of our job is to actually define what success means for whatever it is that we're doing. So having those or seeing those conversations and all of the talk around who did what was successful, what sounded like it was successful, and maybe not, wasn't necessarily.
Right.
um, the hype circle, the attention economy,
Mhm.
all those things. And if you've been listening, you'll hear me talk about this. But if you've been watching, I try to actually wear clothes that have something to do with what we're talking about.
Mhm. Mhm.
And an episode or two ago, I talked about Supreme and this certain shirt where I was like, "Yeah, where's the hype? Where's the real?"
Right.
And because I can be the wild card, I said, "You know what?
Yes, indeed.
Here's the time for the not Supreme shirt that you might, if you look at it in a glancing way, like, oh,
Mhm.
it's a Supreme shirt. No, no, no. It says Reclaim,
Mm.
and there's a reason for that.
Okay. Talk about it.
It's a whole thing of reclaiming not just our culture, but culture as a whole.
Mhm.
We talked about culture being more than a trend. We talked about appropriation versus appreciation.
Mhm.
Um, and those are not really that far away from the difference between hype and substance,
Right.
right? So that's why it's just like, okay, how or even when, because I mean, I don't think we'll be able to answer that yet,
Yeah.
but when will we get tired of just the hype?
So it's interesting because we talked about how, hype definitely can fuel stock price. Why does hype fuel stock price? Maybe obvious to some, not others. But hype is really about the story that's built around a particular change that's happening or a phenomenon. So hype can really be fueled by public relations.
Hmm.
Though that kind of storytelling hits potentially consumer editorial, but it can also hit trades, which then can also have influence on Wall Street, right? So, depending on what the agenda is of a particular company or business, um, hype might supersede, substance or those deeply ingrained, consumer driven decisions that give you that substance versus the top of the iceberg kind of hype situation that gets you that attention in the marketplace.
Hmm.
I'm one to believe that you can have both potentially, depending on how you spin the story. But I believe that we're in a hype moment right now, in part because there's so much marketplace instability that the hype is kind of that quick fix
Hmm.
that you can get
Yeah.
when you can't control for all of these other factors like tariffs and all these other sort of geopolitical headwinds that could be impacting your business.
Hmm. Yeah. It reminds me of the conversations that used to happen because I'm old around fame and fortune.
You're not old, but please continue.
I'm at least an old head,
All right,
and I wear
that's
that
fine.
proudly.
That's
So there's
fine.
that.
Okay.
But there's so many people who think that the two go together. And to your point, that's not to say that they cannot go together,
Right.
but acknowledging how they are not the same thing and why
Mhm.
that matters
Mhm.
is critical to whatever you deem success to be,
Yeah.
right? Um, we work in the advertising space, so it would be best case scenario disingenuous and
Mhm.
uh, in reality absolutely ridiculous to say that we do not believe in hype,
Oh, absolutely.
right? That's
Yeah.
half of our job.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
What we're talking
And
about,
doing so in an integrated fashion.
right? What we're talking about in terms of the bad hype is the empty hype.
Right.
Just because you're getting attention doesn't mean that you're successful or unsuccessful, you know?
I mean, yes, but then that again, that could also depend on the goals that you set
Yeah.
as an organization.
Hmm.
It's, you know, have the goals been set against short-term wins versus long-term wins? Or in the case that we discussed, how within an organization or within a company, different brands can play different roles
Mhm.
to get to, that bigger agenda that the company might have, right? And if you are if we are talking about a bigger company, you can have, as a chief marketing officer, a point of view on how different brands can help you reach those goals. Like some brands need to kind of stay in that substance space with a little less hype because of who they are and what they mean to their particular customers and like how they're growing, which may be more in that substance space. Another brand might need a little more hype because whew, it might be kind of dying a little bit and losing some cachet, but there's this balancing act that they play with different tactics and budgets in order to maybe reach bigger goals. So in the end, I don't want to say it depends, but sometimes it depends. But there are other companies that are smaller where you only have one brand, and you only really have one good shot at it. So, what's the strategy for you, particularly if you're up against a lot of big players that have more budget than you, that have more relationships than you do from a media and channels perspective? Like, then how do you break through and then still maintain the integrity of this little thing that you created that people love?
Right. Right. And just as a quick note, if you're listening, you're probably like, okay, what are they talking about? I'm going to apologize now because you're going to have access to Deconstructed to find out the details of this because we want to keep this is the main episode. We keep things kind of a little bit more general so that we can cover more stuff. If you want to know exactly what we're talking about, Deconstructed, that's a premium show. That's a bonus show. We'll get to that in a minute. But I think to your point, there's a desire for clarity. There's always a desire for clarity that pops up, right?
Hmm.
Um, and when people don't openly define what success actually is
Yeah.
and how they can attribute the activity, their actions, their strategy, their execution to that campaign, to that success or non-success.
Hmm.
People can start making up their own stories in their mind. And yes, you want to be talked about,
Hmm.
but one step further, how do you want to be discussed? What do you want people to say about you?
Hmm.
You know, um, you can have all the attention in the world and be talked about in the most negative way possible
Hmm.
or the most positive way possible.
Right.
And who's talking should depend or should be some sort of reflection of who you want to be.
Right. And then the question is, who or what in the marketplace is driving who or what you want to be? Because it can be easy for companies and brands to get caught up in whatever the hype of the day is.
Hmm.
But what does that really have to do with your brand, your brand values, your customer, and what moves the needle for you?
Right.
Right? And so that's also part of finding that balance. Not everything that's hot in the streets is for you
Hmm.
or should be meaningful to you and your brand. The question is, do you have the foundations in place to be disciplined enough to know when you step into the hype, if there's a new and fresh thing happening, and when you realize, it's not for me, it's
Yeah.
not for us?
Yeah. What I like most is how you said the discipline
Yes.
because at least, I mean, old head speaking again.
Old head's cool. I'm technically kind of an old head too. I'll take that.
Okay. I'm gonna let you have it. I'm not gonna argue.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
I was
It's
gonna say,
fine. Yeah.
but target market? Isn't that marketing 101? Isn't that like one of the first things that we learn? You're supposed to identify who it is that's, supposed to purchase from you?
Mhm. Yes, but I'm gonna come back to the stock price again,
Mhm.
right? Because these are conversations that I'm sure both of us have over and over again,
Mhm.
where we can do the work to identify, given what you have to offer, who you are, what you stand for, this particular segment of the population is right for you to focus on, even in consideration of your competitive environment, right?
Mhm.
However, what ends up happening is some some folks need to be able to go back to their leadership to say, actually, this is our sort of creative audience, but our real audience is actually 5 times that size, right? Because that could impact how much budget they get, how much investment they're going to have, how much they're going to be able to go back and talk about how much it can contribute to revenue. And then that impacts their bonus and et cetera, et cetera. So there's like all these complications. So yes, textbook marketing 101, do the segmentation first, then figure out what is the audience that you want to go after within that's targeting. But we both know that there are a lot of other factors that can get in the way of some of that discipline. And then the question I have for you is, when you run into that, what do you lean on? How do you find your way back to the discipline?
Ah, so I guess in a sense there's two answers, right? Because there's my answer, which is if I'm running the company,
Sure.
and then if the other answer is what my advice would be.
Mm.
And to be honest, they're very similar, right? Um, because I lean so heavily on the brand as a promise side of things, so not just the brand
Ah,
side of things, but the brand as a promise side of things.
yeah.
I believe that you are in service to the group of people, the consumers
Mm-hmm.
who you say you're in service to. You do everything that you can
Mm-hmm.
to not just make them happy, but be real with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, the other conversation that pops up around me a lot is who owns the brand.
Okay.
A lot of times companies say we own the brand. And then there's some people who I personally believe overcorrect and say, well, the consumer does. To me,
Yeah.
oh,
We're going to get in ownership in the next, but keep talking about it from this perspective. We're gonna come back to
oh yeah,
that.
no, there's
Y'all
gonna be,
stay tuned for the next episode. We're
yeah,
going
that's
to talk
another
about
part of
this.
ownership. But
All right, go
but in
ahead.
terms of just the brand itself, a lot of times company says we own it.
Yeah.
Um, some people who I believe overcorrect say the consumer owns it.
Mm-hmm.
I say that if the point is to create a relationship, then it's both.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a conversation. It's a search for clarity. Sometimes a company will overlook something or not realize something is happening that matters to the people who are willingly giving them money.
Yeah.
And that misstep can affect whether those people still do. There are some times when consumers think um, a brand is trying to do a certain thing and they don't have every piece of the information. So a misunderstanding can happen there.
Mhm.
And it's not that the consumer was necessarily wrong. I worked in retail, so I
Mm.
I don't think the customer is always right. No, no. I believe the
Oh
customer should always
man.
be listened to. You should always
Mhm.
be considered, but they're not always right because no one's always right.
Mhm.
And in that vein, sometimes the consumer's like, "Oh, I didn't know that." Connection comes with conversation. It comes with trying to build a community. So, who owns the brand? Actually, the community. Yes, you have to get buy-in from the consumer,
Mhm.
but there's always going to be details that the brand understands because they are trying to build something.
Right. So then when it comes to the larger consideration of reinvention, then what's the role that the brand plays and what's the role the consumer plays?
So the brand definitely has to do well, actually, you know what? Because I think in real time all the time. It's 1, it depends.
All right.
2, it depends what's happening,
Mhm.
right? So as people evolve,
Mhm.
sometimes their positions on things do as well. Brands need to be paying attention to that,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Um, when mindsets evolve or better expand, you got to pay attention.
Mhm.
Now, brands may have products or services that are like, you know what, if we do this, is actually better for the person. Let's see if these people would like that.
Mm.
And now the consumer needs to be listening.
Mhm.
I think the question is, where does that evolution or that expansion actually need to happen? And that will determine who plays what part.
Right.
Because, you know, just reinvention in general, you have to see not only what's going on in your world, but what's going on in the world around you to determine what you're going to do about it. You know, reinvention is not always necessarily innovation. Sometimes it's stepping back.
Right. Sometimes it's stepping back in this world of AI and landing in humanity or deciding that we're going to prioritize the human.
Mhm.
Um, that's not a brand new concept.
Right.
In fact, that's what our whole role in strategy was built on. Um, was being at least on the theoretically on the side of the customer. Like,
Mhm.
yes, you have this business thing that you want to do, but why should people care? And we are relentlessly after the why. Um, but I think it's tough right now because there's so much happening that could make you believe that this feeling of everything breaking and rebuilding is always where we're going to be. But I think particular particularly in US history, we've actually had this over and over and over again.
Mhm.
That I think with the advancement of technology and even becoming more globally integrated, these things can happen faster. And I think it can be hard for brands to keep up. So, in that vein, when we talked about what's driving reinvention, you know, sometimes it's those opportunities and threats that are outside of our control. Shout out to Marketing 101. That's really driving the reinvention.
Mm.
You know, you might not have something that your customer is calling for necessarily, or you might not have this big deliverable internally inside your business, but you see something on the horizon that you know that you're going to have to respond to,
Mhm.
even if it's like a phased approach, because you've got some new competition that you never would have thought of in a million years, you know.
Right.
Um, and that could be local or global because both have almost just as much access to your customer, um, which really makes, you know, 2026 and beyond a really new day.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think it's also about framing or making sure that you don't frame it. Not saying that you are doing this, but as
Yeah.
a company, as a leader, to not frame it in fear.
Mm, absolutely. It's just all part of management. You
Mhm.
know, that's what we're talking about. And I want to say management out loud again and again, management, because so many of us are afraid of management. The first thing we want to do is if something is disruptive or makes us uncomfortable, that we just want to cut it out and just move on. And it's like, no, you might have to lead and manage through, and to see an opportunity to make something better, to make it worthwhile for that shift that you see coming. Um, and that is a product or service that can also be humans and people that work for you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because that is such a huge part of reinvention as well. Like, who do you even have around you that are making those choices and decisions? Whatever you see on the horizon, do you have the right people in place that can actually navigate that new challenge or that thing that's coming? Or do we have people in place that are just cool with what's always been done? And then where does that leave us?
Well, yeah. So that, I mean, that brings us to something that was coming to mind when you were talking about it. And I thought about a situation musically,
Mm-hmm.
and it took me to the idea of a level of arbitration, right? So you always have cultural arbiters, tastemakers,
Yes.
and then you have your brand arbiter, your steward.
Mm.
Now, granted, both of these individuals or both of these entities need to still pay attention to what other people are saying, you know, even if they have the quote unquote last word.
Mm-hmm.
It makes more sense to consider the entire conversation because that's how they protect their role. But I think of a moment when I was doing parties because old head.
Wait, you were doing parties in what capacity? Were you DJing? Were you promoting? Just
So
let
I
the people
so
know.
I had stopped DJing at this point.
Okay.
I'm sure I have DJ stories as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But this is a point where me and my former business partner, shout out to Sir Robert Nelson,
Mm-hmm.
we were doing some events, marketing company, so we would promote goods and services through events. And during this party, DJ plays Deja Vu by Beyonce and Jay-Z.
Okay.
This is before the song was on radio. DJ's thinking, Beyonce and Jay-Z? Oh, easy. Of course this is a win. Plays it crickets.
Is this in New York?
Yeah.
Okay.
Next week, plays it. Dance floor blows up.
Okay.
Sometimes you do need that tastemaker.
Mm-hmm.
To me, as a former DJ at that point, as someone who heard the song, as someone who could picture what the song would do, I was offended on week one that people were like, what is this? I was absolutely offended.
Okay.
And then I was kind of offended week two when people were like, oh, this is my, I'm like, that's just me. Because sometimes that's how things do go. But what if the DJ had decided to never play that song again because it did not work in week one?
Mm-hmm.
The way people would likely talk about him for whether it was a short term moment or for weeks or months for not playing a Beyonce and Jay-Z song at a party anywhere, much less New York. He would have been, especially like today's social age, would have been dragged. Seriously. Mm-hmm. Now, granted, in terms of how draggings can go, that's light work, but still not a good look.
Yeah.
Sometimes like reinvention is like, okay, wait, okay, didn't work this time, but you know what? Got to go back to it because I know, like, these like, okay, I know what I'm doing, and I know I was right. They don't know yet. Mm-hmm. They're going to come around though. And when you're talking about, oh, we actually have to manage a situation, we have to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
DJ made a decision. made two decisions. Ultimately, won, right? Ultimately became a positive thing.
Mhm.
Ultimately, it was the thing that it needed to be. It just took longer.
Right.
So it was just like this is a short lesson that popped into my head about reinvention and thinking about how to get buy-in, thinking of how things sometimes have to go. They because you had mentioned something about control,
Mhm.
and we have to think about the things that we can't control all the time too.
Right, which is why which is why I like what you said about buy-in, because buy-in is tied to timing also. So, the thing that we know about tastemakers is that they're so far ahead of everyone,
Mhm.
so far ahead of everyone. Well, sorry, not everyone, but a lot of times the people who have the budget, the power, the ability to invest in what that far ahead looks like,
Mm.
right? So the tastemaker can be can do two things. I believe a tastemaker can drive hype and substance
Definitely.
because the tastemaker knows where all the amplifiers are,
Mhm.
right? That matter, but they're steeped enough in the culture that they can bring that substance for sustainability,
Mhm.
right? The challenge is often sort of bridging the tastemaker with the investor, or like, or in our case, in our experience, the brand,
Mhm.
and then being able to bring everyone along with the tastemaker, or the tastemaker bringing everybody up to speed, and then doing so in a way where the timing is opportune and it makes sense.
Mhm.
So it's like there needs to be that partnership between hype and substance in that way in order to have both a short-term and long-term impact that could be both stock price driving and revenue driving,
Mhm.
you know. Um but we talked before about how there needs to be that bit of a balance, but in this case, in the scenario that I described, like, hype is can be in the area of the tastemaker where there's foundational substance that the tastemaker could have, but some of those elements are actually living with the brand as well, and to marry those 2 is where the power can be.
Absolutely. But I think another thing though, because when you said investor
Mhm.
and then you connect it to the brand, so yes, the brand needs to invest in itself. I feel like
Correct.
sometimes brands forget that.
Yes, that's it.
Um, but the investor, the outside investor, is often the one who gets tricked by the hype so much because they're not connected to the tastemaker or they're not even always connected to the brand itself. They're
Mhm.
connected to the hype around the brand.
Mhm.
And now they're just really trying to vibe out.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, is that where we come to that place in our, are we at Built on Vibes yet?
Yes, definitely, definitely.
We're at Built on Vibes segment, ladies and gentlemen and friends.
Yeah. And that's even part of the reason why I wanted to name this segment that because the vibes are always not enough.
Yeah.
You know, it's just it's something. It's not the vibes are nothing, but
Mhm.
if you're vibing out on just what people are saying in general, that's how you can get yourself in these weird spaces where you're calling something a success that's not necessarily a success yet or may not ever be.
I mean, and speaking of vibes and, how you're, like, judging success, I think another thing brands have to be careful of is seeing a phenomenon that's happening in culture, deciding that, oh, this is cool. We're going to ride on this for our brand, and you know nothing of why
Mhm.
or how that came to be, or even if you have a place in it.
Right.
Often, when people are deciding something is cool, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, it was built by marginalized people who were just trying to find and create space for themselves. I do not care that in 2026, it's a multi-billion-dollar business or industry at this point. If you know how it started, that's why it's cool for the most part. People just trying to find and create space for themselves when the dominant culture wouldn't let them in.
Mhm.
And so now you shift your focus and say, oh, this is cool now. This is cool for us. But wait, you wouldn't even let me in before. Now you want to come rock with me? So it's a careful thing with brands. And I think it's a good double check. If you look at something that's outside of yourself, that's outside of what you know, and you see it and you think it's cool, that don't mean you can just go buy the t-shirt and put it on and just be a part of it.
Mhm.
It don't work like that.
Except
Like
the culture of t-shirts. You can buy those anytime you want. There was a full sale with thecultureofpod.com /store. You can buy those. But yeah, sorry.
the one exception. Thank
Correct.
you.
Correct.
All right, cool. Yes. Get the merch. We got all kinds of things.
But I mean, that does go back to what you were saying about responsibility and why the brand actually needs to be a promise, why there's this responsibility that actually surrounds everything that a brand does. Responsibility to the consumers and responsibility to the investors to tell them when to tell the investor when the hype that they see is not correct for the consumer, because at the end of the day,
Mm-hmm.
the success for the business
Mm-hmm.
is money coming in.
Correct.
And the money that comes in, that I think is most important, is coming from the consumer, not the investor. The investor wants the company to make money because that's how they make money.
Yeah.
So once again, who's the one who's most important? Who's the one that we have to really consider and take care of and understand and try to connect with?
It's crazy because the bigger something gets, it's almost harder to satisfy and support those diehard originals.
Mhm.
Um and I'm not saying it's necessarily right or wrong. It might be a thing that just kind of happens. And in many cases, particularly in North America, I think that can happen in order for a new thing to be created and built. And it's kind of the life cycle of things, that
Mhm.
product life cycle of like, growth and falling off, much like a storytelling arc in a
Mhm.
way. Um, but I think we also have to be mindful of when those things are real and when they're happening, what that means for reinvention, but then also what that could mean for starting something new and shifting focus and investment towards that new thing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. But yeah, we're going to let this sit now, because I feel like what you just mentioned goes into deconstructed and into another subject that we'll talk about on another day, basically. But um since we had this discussion, which was great, I want to make sure that I invite you all again to like, subscribe, share, comment, do all the things. It's 2026. We want to talk to y'all more too. Yes, we enjoy speaking to each other, of course. Yes, we will have more guests, but we want to talk to you, the listeners. We want to hear what you have to say. Keep it cute. But I will say that for this episode. On behalf of my co host, Amber Chenevert, PhD, I am Gary J. Nix. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you again very soon.